Obviously, the exact starting screen you'll see will change over time, but it will always contain an area where you can insert your prompts in the end because you're interacting with an AI. So in the end, what you're writing here is a prompt. So for example, what I'll do here is I'll start my development server so that with that started and running, I can visit the starting page of this Next.js app. And then of course, I can go to my Claude Code session here and ask it to replace the starting page of this Next.js project with a page that says hello world, centered in the middle of the screen, something like this. And what's important is that you can be more specific, and you'll see that throughout the course, but you can also be pretty vague for certain instructions or tasks, and Claude Code will, as you see, if you take a look at what it did, and it will always output what it does, Claude Code will, for example, search through the code base. And here it understands that it's searching for a page and that it's in a Next.js project, also because I told it, but it would be able to figure that out from the package.json file without me telling it to. And then it searched for page TSX files, found one file, which then of course has to be the starting page if there is only one file. And then it read that file, that one file it found, to understand it, to then thereafter write to it. Now here it actually didn't finish the write yet, because the first time you run Claude in a project, by default it's not running in a mode where you granted it all permissions. You can do that, we'll see it, but by default it's not in that mode. So it asks me down here whether I wanted to edit this page TSX file. And it asks me, do you want me to make this edit? Now what's this edit? Well, if you're running Claude Code in a terminal outside of Visual Studio Code, it should show you the changes it wants to make here in that terminal. But since I'm running it inside of Visual Studio Code, it actually uses its built-in integration with that editor, because Claude Code, despite being a CLI tool, has many integrations with various editors, like for example Visual Studio Code. Now, chances are you're not seeing that, even though you might be using Visual Studio Code. And the reason for that is that you need to install the official Claude Code extension for Claude Code to interact with Visual Studio Code. So in the extensions marketplace in Visual Studio Code, you can search for Claude Code and then use that official extension by Anthropic and install that. And then in the future, you should get this integration and you should get this code comparison here. So what it did here is it opened up this div editor, this code comparison tool that Visual Studio Code also uses for comparing Git commits, for example, and it shows us the changes it wants to perform. On the left side here, we have the original code file as it was before Claude Code did something to it or wanted to do something to it. And then on the right side here, we see the new version of that file, so the changes Claude Code wants to make. And you see it wants to delete a bunch of code and then simply add this one line here, essentially, where it outputs hello world. What you can do here in Visual Studio Code with its Claude Code integration is you can actually accept this. I can also reject the proposed changes, but of course I can also continue in the terminal, which is what I'll do, and either pick yes, or if I know that there might be more changes and I don't want to decide every time, I can also choose yes, allow all edits during the session, which is typically what you do, because it's super annoying if you have a more complex change and it's working on a bunch of files to always grant this permission. So here I'll choose the second option. Now it does that. Now it also shows me the changes here in the CLI. And it's done, because that was a simple task. And with my dev server still up and running, if I go back to this page, I now unsurprisingly see hello world there.